community, we don't really get to use their recycled stuff because of the way everything is processed. But with Far West, when they harvest these, they cut this block of mushrooms off. That's one harvest. Remember, they're doing 30-something, 3,000 a day running through, so the warehouses have to be emptied very quickly, so they get one harvest. These blocks go to the recycle pile, and the recycle pile is twice as long as this room, about as big as this room. And so after we take the tour, and then we go have our big grilled, barbecued mushrooms and all the stuff that everybody brings in. We have 100 people coming on the field trip. Then we go to the recycle pile and load up all the trucks and vans with these blocks, take them home and make mushroom blocks in the garden, and all winter long they're pruning out as the rains come. So we get all the mushrooms that they don't get because they've turned over and recycled it to the public. And so it's just a little bit different way of doing things, but I like the old-fashioned method selfishly because we can take advantage of that for our class.
But anyway, after we harvest the mushroom, we have a machine to empty the bottle. And it goes into a truck. We take it to our neighbor who is a winery. They actually plow the material back into the soil. Okay. And then the way I look at this is it's almost like a probiotic. The soil is the stomach of the vegetable. And the material actually conditions the soil a little better. I think controlling the microbes. So a more friendly microbe for the vegetable. And the vegetable actually focus on growing the grapes, and not to have to expend the energy fighting off undesirable microbes or infections. So, people with growing tomato with our substrate, they said they get a few more lucks of tomato out of it. The corn grow a whole foot taller. So a lot of fish stories out there.
But it feels good. I mean, our stuff gets contracted out to organic farms, and it's, it feels good that it's going somewhere else after we've.
Yeah, but if you look at the cycle of what we do, is really we just fit in perfectly. We can put our facility in the middle of San Francisco if I can afford the rent, middle of Manhattan, and grow a very nice mushroom. Basically, what you're looking at is this is really a patch of mushroom in the forest floor. So to get a tray of mushroom, it could be an acres of the place that you find that amount of mushroom. So what we are doing is we kind of squeeze it into one little bottle, this one patch, and you have 16 bottles, you have 16 clumps of mushrooms, and then we have a whole harvesting room. It's really the forest we brought into a little room. And each one of them is independent of each other, they're self-sustained. And the only thing it gives out is like us, carbon dioxide. So we were thinking about in the future, maybe if we expand our facilities, we'll tie a greenhouse on the other end of our harvesting room to extract the carbon dioxide and then put it through tomato plants or cucumber. Then you really have a good process. So I think from a sustainable agricultural standpoint, this is really the project.
That's actually an interesting segue, because I know we have a lot of questions that we will absolutely get to, because that's the best part of Kitchen Table Talks. But I would love to learn what the future holds, and from all of you. I know, Toby, you brought some interesting articles here, and that I can pass around.
Well, we also grow the reishi mushroom, which is a hard polypore.
Did you bring that one?
I did. It's what you'll see in the bag. It's just a very small.
Is it these?
That is.
Yeah, and they're on the table.
Right now they're very, very, very tiny. And then there's also mushrooms I brought that are the dried.
They're on the table.
They're on that table?
Should be on
kind of a reddish?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So those are the kind of mushrooms you will see on this growing on the side of trees. There's people who call them shelf fungus. It's very hard. And it is one of the leading medicinal mushrooms. It's, people will come up at the farmer's market and say, oh, I just read about reishi mushrooms. Do you have those? It isn't a mushroom you just slice up and saute. First of all, it is about as hard as a piece of wood. It's also bitter as hell. And so it's something that you would use more in a tea. You put them in a capsule. But it's a tricky mushroom to grow. And that's being passed around, you'll see just the tiny little fruiting body coming up. The block itself, after we have harvested the mushroom, first of all, those incubate for about 6 months. The first couple times we grew them, well, first time we grew them, we got nothing. And then the time that was the most prolific, it was just crazy prolific, is that they incubated for about 6 months. We thought, oh, this isn't going to work. My farm manager turned the misters on in the room, and within days, all of a sudden, they just had 6, 7, 8 mushrooms on every block. And when we cut them off, within about a week and a half, right out of where we cut them off, came another mushroom. And they just kept going. They were just crazy. The block itself becomes very hard. And there is an artist in town, Phil Ross, who wanted to build a structure out of the reishi block, and so we cooked the blocks for him, and he actually put them in molds so that he could make these bricks. And this structure went to Dusseldorf in Germany, and it was his reishi structure. And then there was a story about it in the New York Times, and unfortunately, they listed us as being the people who made this growing building. And so then we just had endless calls from people who wanted to grow, who wanted to build a house out of mushrooms, or wanted to invest in our company that was developing these growing, structures and things. And it was, every time I came into the office, I would hear my husband on the phone saying, actually, we're really a mushroom farm. We're actually growing, but I really want to grow mushrooms. And I want to grow these houses out of mushrooms. And it was just, anyway, it's calmed down a little bit, but there are companies who are talking about using the mycelium to make packing material and insulation because it is so strong. And if you feel that block, it's pretty hard. And that one, is not still a dried block. But I haven't quite jumped into, this new development. Where
a lot of the things that you hear about on, like, there's quite a few things that you may hear about on microremediation and building materials and insulation and things like that. And yes, it can be done. Yes, there are prototypes out there, and yes, there's a lot of proprietary information, but the actual production, and there's the hype and the reality, So if you've seen some of the things, like, I think there was the packaging material that had the little corners that go into your products and protect them from bouncing around inside the box. They make them now out of mushroom mycelium, and the guy who's making them is an engineer, and he's figured all these things out. But he says, yes, you can just take these and compost them locally. Well, it's basically, that's chitin that's in the cell walls of the mushroom, and you can't just take that and compost it locally. It just doesn't work that easily. But you could do it, but it's not figured out. So it's one of those things where we have this old paradigm, we come up with these industrialized mass production things, and then the production line doesn't take care of the end result. It goes back to the dump. So unless people, yes, you could compost that locally, but is it really being composted locally?
Obviously, in the past 5-10 years, your business grow as people become less, mushroom phobic like they used to be, And obviously, if you go to a store, you go to any of the higher-end supermarkets, you're going to find more varieties of mushrooms that make it into more of the mainstream. So you're seeing more of that. You're seeing more of awareness. I don't know if some folks are saying with the popularity of wild mushrooms, that some of the areas that are foraged are getting overpicked. Don't know if that's true or not, but you see, Whole Foods. I live in Oakland. I was in that Whole Foods, and there were these beautiful porcinis. I'm like, heck, I can't even get them at my restaurant, and there's porcinis. So you're just obviously we're acquiring a taste for them. We're especially here in the Bay Area, we're all of us are gourmands. We shop at the farmer's market and we'll jump on the, get the latest vegetable or whatever. And mushrooms happen to be that. And I think it's a good thing that we're consuming more of them because there's a lot of health benefits to them, as well as they're interesting and they taste great.
I think what I'm looking at is that if you look at the white button mushroom, which is 99% of this country's production of mushroom, 98, 99% is the white button mushroom. So I call that the Folgers coffee. This is Starbucks. So,
Eric, you're right. I mean, when we started doing farmers markets 27 years ago, we started selling mushrooms that were the button mushroom. And as my husband says, we sold 3 types. There was the big white button mushroom, the small white button mushroom, and the mature button mushroom. And that was it. And then and that's pretty much what people knew. And then when we went into business with Jim Hammond of Hazeldell Mushrooms, we started bringing in, the shiitake and the oyster. And I have to be honest, the first time I ever saw an oyster mushroom, somebody had given me a package. It was at one of those food shows that we did years ago. And, I grew up with button mushroom. I kept looking at that oyster mushroom, and John kept saying, are you gonna cook those oyster mushrooms? I was like, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know about it. And here I am, 30 years later, and growing all these varieties. But at the farmers market, and part of the reason we do farmers markets and still do farmers markets, we now with all the family members do 18 farmers markets. And then every day somebody says, oh, you really need to do this market. It's like, I've run out of kids and trucks. Sorry. And daughter-in-laws now. We have daughter-in-laws doing them. But it's where people are, they'll see somebody buying mushrooms and they're still over there in their comfort zone with there's something, and then they say, so what are these like? And the nice thing about a farmer's market is, you tell them about the mushroom, and then you say, and take one, here, I threw one in your bag, take it home, try it. And that's always been the way we introduce people to mushrooms, and introduce them to something that they haven't tried. And there's no fear there. It's like, oh, wow. And they're always surprised when we give somebody a mushroom, because it's like, oh, okay. It's like, slice it up, saute it, and just try it, see what you think. Shiitake mushroom, you think they're slimy? You need to cook them till they're crisp and try that. But there's less fear, and of course farmers market shoppers are certainly more adventurous shoppers. But there's that interest, and there's that relationship you have with the farmer. What do I do with it? Which you don't have with the guy at the Safeway who doesn't know what to do with it anyway. But, what do I do with this vegetable I've never seen before? And the farmer will tell you, it's sausage, put it in a soup or put it in, and with the mushrooms we do the same.
Eric, maybe you could tell us like the top 3 faux pas or the things that people do wrong when cooking mushrooms that you learned as a chef.
Well,
to do right.
Like I was talking about, mushrooms like high heat to kind of dry them out a little bit. I mean, depending on what you want to do with the mushroom, but when people say, well, I still like a good button mushroom, really sautéed, great. But a lot of it's like boring, doesn't have much flavor. Well, because you're like boiling the thing. Not to say some mushrooms work well when they're boiled, like a nameko in a miso broth or something of that nature. But maybe that's a faux pas. And also some of them, like a button mushroom, like, if you have it raw in a salad, it's really not that great. But if you maybe, say, marinate it in some olive oil and some herbs and stuff, then you got something that's a whole lot more fun. I mean, really, that's about it. And in terms of there are folks that I know that are like, oh yeah, we eat raw chanterelles. I'm like, well, I don't eat raw chanterelles because give me a bellyache. Back in the day, we used to do a chanterelle sorbet that someone had the Michelangelo sorbet. I think it was Larry Stickney, which would actually taste great. But I was like, it's good, and we actually did it for a mushroom dinner. But I knew some folks who are like, I didn't feel that great after eating the chanterelle sorbet. Because the plus is you capitalize on the chanterelle sort of apricot quality, but the minus is you got that sort of cellulose and fiber that's not kind of broken down by heat, and